Music. Good evening. I'm Eva Pilgrim. Thanks for streaming with us. It's day 2 of testimony in the Sean Diddy trial and the prosecution star witness. His ex-girlfriend, Cassie Ventura, taking the stand. The disturbing video of Diddy and Cassie in an LA hotel hallway. One of the sparks that really ignited this case today. For the first time in 6 years, Cassie coming face to face with Diddy, telling the jury in graphic detail about what they say is the darker side of the rap mogul. Over the span of their 10-year relationship, Cassie admitting she was young and initially wanted to make him happy by fulfilling his sexual desires, but quickly became reluctant. Ventura says the freak-offs took up so much of her time, it felt like a full-time job. When she didn't cater to Combs's desires, he became violent and abusive, bashing and stomping her head. At times in the courtroom, hearing the explicit details of these sexual escapades, Combs's mother and children back for a second day in a row. Prosecutors argue Combs used power and fame to lead a criminal enterprise for 2 decades to allegedly abuse, threaten, and force women into drug-fueled sex marathons that lasted for days. He strongly denies all of these allegations. If convicted, Combs could face life in prison, a stark contrast to the life of luxury he's known for. He has pleaded not guilty to all charges. We'll take you inside the courtroom in just a moment for the emotional testimony, and we'll also take a closer look at Cassie Ventura, the singer and now star witness on the stand. Let's go to Aaron Katersky. He was inside the courtroom for all of it, and he joins me now from Lower Manhattan. Aaron, this was the first time that Cassie Ventura and her ex, Sean Combs, have seen each other since 2018. What was that moment like in the courtroom? When she walked into the room, Sean Combs appeared to look at her, but Eva did not seem to look at him. And during her testimony, I'm not sure she really made eye contact with Sean Combs. She turned occasionally to her husband, Alex Fine, who was seated in the courtroom, had other members of her family, her attorney there in support,
present,
but she
and no longer has a
such
voice
graphic
who will
detail,
pursue
too
justice
graphic
for her
us to discuss
accusation.
here. Now, in such
As of the
soft-spoken,
taken against Diddy,
matter-of-fact tones,
no expansion of
describing
the
degrading
investigation,
sexual activity
no
that she
isolation
said
orders,
Sean Combs
no
forced her
equipment
into
access,
starting when
no
she was
suspension
20.
of
She
attorney
called herself
communication.
naive, too.
Everything
Naive,
inside
she said,
solitary
to really
block C
understand
continued as
what was
before.
going on, or
Everything
understand
except the
power
fear.
dynamics
If
in
a
the
female
relationship.
warden can vanish
Because she
after
said
a
if it
single
turned him
nothing
on,
except the
that's
fear.
what they did.
If a
Her
female
preferences
warden can
weren't at all
vanish after a
considered.
single note,
And
the
she
ones
said
who
she
once
was
worked
passed around
overnight in
and
that area,
objectified by
the
men,
ones
and
who
with
filed
other
for
men
leave
she
without
didn't
giving
want
a
to be having
reason,
sex
the
with.
ones who saw but
On
never
Sean
spoke.
Combs's
No
whim,
one
describing
mentions the
how he
note,
wanted to set
but
up
everyone
recording
knows it
equipment to
appeared.
record these
And if what it
freak-offs.
says is
She said
true,
it made
the
me feel
punishment.
insane.
Part
She
3.
said it was
The
humiliating
person no longer
and
in the
disgusting.
system. The internal
Aaron
personnel
Cassie
database
shared
of the
that she
Atlanta
didn't
Federal
have a whole lot
Detention
of
Center
sexual
updated
experience
its weekly
before she
roster.
met Diddy.
Under the
She was
category
only
Special
19
Personnel Code
when she met
Adjustment,
them.
the name
There's
of
a
Warden
nearly 2
TD was
decades
marked
age
as
difference
removed
between
from
these
system
two.
by
Talk more
administrative
about that.
order.
Power
There was no
dynamic
decision
and how
number
their
recorded,
relationship
but
changed
was
over time.
deactivated. Her
Well, she
personal
was
contact
19 and a
information
young singer
disappeared from the
Cole
internal
signed her to a
network
10-album
exactly
deal with
36
Tower
hours
Records.
after she filed
So
her
a long-term
complaint.
deal, and she
The
said
changelog
that
was
she only made
executed
one
from the
album.
system's highest
Otherwise, the
access
freak-offs
level
took up
server,
so much
a
of her
device
time
bearing the
that it
identifier
stifled her music career,
DCCA1,
but it controlled
located
her
in the
financially,
coordination
she
office
said.
on the 4th
So she
floor
felt
of the
like her
Security
livelihood,
Administration
her
wing.
career, her life really
Only
depended
2
on Sean
individuals
Combs
possess
keeping
the
him
authority
happy.
to perform a
Otherwise, she
system-level
said she feared
personnel
what might
removal
happen
at that
now.
tier, the
Interestingly,
head
she
of
talked
Federal
a lot
Human
about
Resources
not wanting
and
him to
Detention
break up with
Center.
her now, whether
No
that was
confirmation
because she thought he
exists
might
as
get
application was
violent or
made.
because she would
The
lose some
removal
the
of
life
Warden
that she had
TD's
acquired.
name was not
She didn't
accompanied
really
by
say,
any
but we
or
know
protective
that the
reassignment.
defense is expected to
At
argue
11:20
that, sure,
a.m.,
Sean
a printed
Combs and
copy of the
Cassie had a
personnel
toxic,
deployment
violent
chart was
relationship.
generated in
The defense has
preparation for
called
the
her
new
a
week's
strong adult
schedule.
woman
Under
who
the
made a
section
voluntary
marked
choice,
Internal
Aaron. You were
Alert,
in that
TD's
courtroom.
name.
These details were a lot. What was the jury's reaction? Hearing her testimony, it's really hard to read the jury. Most of them are pretty stone-faced. There was one woman who did seem to be following along. She would occasionally smirk at the mention of baby oil or lubricant, which was used so frequently that, as Ventura described it, the hotel rooms where the freak-offs occurred were left in complete disarray. There was candle wax and oil everywhere, but most of the jurors sat stone-faced, listening to what amounts to the humiliating recollection of a decade's worth of a woman's sex life. Aaron, what can we expect to see in court tomorrow? More of the same. Cassie Ventura ended her testimony today, taking jurors to a moment they've already seen, video of what happened in the Los Angeles hotel in March of 2016. The jury had already seen the video, but they saw it again with Cassie narrating it, saying, "That's me," pointing to herself on video, telling the jury this was the first and only time she tried to escape a freak-off before Sean Combs declared it over. She said she got hit by Combs, she had a black eye, and she wanted to leave, but when she tried to, as the jury saw it in video, he dragged her back. Aaron Kursky for us there at the courthouse. Aaron, thank you so much. And let's break all of this testimony down and what it means for this case with ABC News legal contributor and trial attorney Brian Buckmeyer. You were also in the courtroom this testimony. I mean, the details of this testimony from a legal stand. What stood out to you? So, from a legal standpoint, there are a few quotes I want to look at that I think kind of run the gambit of what we're talking about here. We have Cassie Ventura here and some of her quotes saying, here after the freak off, the room was pretty bad off. The candle wax, the all over the place. And then she described having a pungent smell, and she brought us into those rooms in a way that made us think, no one wants to be in there. The only way you can be in there is to be compelled. I think that fed into the government's argument of coercion. But we also heard something that I think the defense is going to jump on, where she talked about that she was insanely jealous. And we remember from Tenny Gargos, she said that this case was about love, infidelity, jealousy, and money. And so I think something like this, Sean Khan professing to be a man of many women, Cassie potentially being jealous, and maybe starting some of those fights or participating in the fights, that's something the defense is going to jump on. And then, of course, this saying that she's super young and naive, people pleaser, getting her personality. I think her testimony really drove home the idea that this was a horrible interaction, that it was a toxic relationship, as Aaron is quoting the defense. But also, I think there's something that both sides will be able to use from her testimony, that she was trafficked as a government is arguing, but also that this could just be a domestic violence case where the defense might be able to argue not these crimes, other crimes. He's guilty of, maybe not guilty of trafficking and racketeering. She also talked at some length about the control that he had over her. And the other people on his staff that helped participate in that, why you think that was so important. All right, so I think the smart thing to do, like start off is talk about Cassie's age. She's 38 years old now. Sean Combs is 55. The age gap was one thing they touched upon, the fact that she was his singer and signed on to his label as a singer, and she had done some modeling in the past, and that he had the ability to control whether or not her music got out. We also saw the testimony about who was in his inner circle. We saw her talk about bodyguards and chief of staff. And to Aaron's point, she was very matter-of-fact and soft-spoken when she spoke. But what I saw when she talked about those bodyguards and saw pictures of them, and it's almost like she started to tremble in her voice a little. You can see a sense of fear as she recounted who the people were, where if she didn't pick up the phone right away, someone would come and find her.
Present,
and I think that
and
really
no longer
colored the
has a
idea of
voice who
this
will
criminal
pursue
enterprise.
justice for her
Again,
accusation.
you were in the courtroom today.
As of the
What
taken
was the
against
jury's
Diddy,
reaction?
no expansion
Hearing
of the
all this,
investigation,
I think
no
as they
isolation
continued to
orders,
watch, you
no
saw some
equipment
people
access,
feverishly
no
taking
suspension
notes
of
in
attorney
the back.
communication.
But I think as the
Everything
testimony
inside
continued
solitary
and
block C
everyone
continued
leaning
as
in,
before.
listening, there
Everything
were
except the
somewhat
fear.
stoic. I didn't
If a
see
female
anyone
warden
really,
can vanish after a
like
single nothing
jaw-dropping
except
about
the
some of
fear.
these
If a female
allegations.
warden
Of
can
course,
vanish
we
after
saw
a
some
single
people,
note,
as we see in
ones
the
who once
reports,
worked overnight
shaking
in
their
that
head
area,
as to some
the
of
ones
these
who filed
statements,
for leave
because
without
they
giving
were
a
very,
reason,
very horrible
the
and
ones who
hard to
saw
listen
but
to
never
at times.
spoke.
At the
No
very
one mentions
beginning
the
of
note,
day, we
but
heard
everyone
from a
knows
male
it
escort
appeared.
that testified
And if
that
what
he
it says
saw
is
Combs
true,
attack
the
Cassie.
punishment.
What stood
Part
out to
3.
you about
The
his
person no
testimony,
longer
Leah?
in the system.
And
The
so
internal
Xavier
personnel
Donaldson
database of the
was a
Atlanta Federal
defense
Detention
attorney
Center
who
updated
continued
its
the
weekly roster.
cross-examination.
Under the
And what
category
stood out
Special
to me
Personnel
is I
Code
think they're
Adjustment,
still, kind
the
of
name of
attacking
Warden
this strategy
TD
of
was marked
attacking
as
the
removed from
credibility as
system
well as
by
the idea of
administrative order.
consent
There was
here.
no
And so
decision number
from there were
recorded,
two
but was
things.
deactivated.
One,
Her personal contact information disappeared from the internal network exactly 36 hours after she filed her complaint. The changelog was executed from the system's highest access level server, a device bearing the identifier DCCA1, located in the coordination office on the 4th floor of the Security Administration Wing. Only 2 individuals possess the authority to perform a system-level personnel removal at that tier, the head of Federal Human Resources and the Detention Center. No confirmation exists as the application was made. The removal of Warden TD's name was not accompanied by any or protective reassignment. At 11:20 a.m., a printed copy of the personnel deployment chart was generated in preparation for the new week's schedule. Under the section marked Internal Alert, TD's name,
Bernardo Villona, who has handled sex crime cases, and former NYPD sex crimes detective Sarah Matz, who also notably worked on the Harvey Weinstein investigation. Thank you both so much for joining with us. Bernardo, start with you. The defense admitted in opening statements that Combs got violent, but say that doesn't mean he was trafficking people. So does the violence matter here? The violence absolutely matters here, because it's the violence is what actually quieted Cassie as to not say anything for all those years. Look how long it took her to finally say something, and that's a common issue that you see with domestic violence victims, with sexual assault victims, because it takes them a long time, number one, to realize that they were victimized, and two, to have the courage to come forward and actually to speak to other people about what happened to them. But three, look what happens behind closed doors. You just never know what happens behind closed doors. So this violence, this her being scared, is all a part of the violence and the crimes that took place here, and what the prosecution is moving forward in front of this jury piece by piece. Sarah, you've investigated a lot of cases. How does violence factor into these types of situations? Well, I think this shows just what Shan Holmes was capable of, and it just shows the toxicity that was surrounding Cassie Ventura in her life. I think being a man of power and having the financial means that he had and having the control over her, I think that all just led into this whole situation where now she has the strength to stand up in court and to speak her mind and state the facts and tell everyone what happened. And she is strong, and she was a victim, and now she's able to speak up for herself and show the world that she's strong and that she's able to come over this and excel in her life and move on. Bernardo, we saw text messages between Cassie and Diddy today. The defense has already said they think the messages show the consensual nature of their relationship. I'm curious, though, what's your reaction to those text messages? So when Cassie was testifying about the text messages, she also put it into context as to why she sent those text messages, what was going on in her mind, that she wanted to satisfy Sean Combs, that she wanted to be a part of this, in the sense of that she was scared, that if she didn't participate, what would happen to her. These are also common signs. The people that are domestic violence victims, that are sexual assault victims, that you see, we're ultimately going to see later on during the trial an expert come in and testify as to how and why victims like these react the way they do and are capable to send these texts that may look consensual to other people, but when you break it down mentally, you're able to see that this is a victim, person that is broken, a person that has been tainted, a person that has been brainwashed as a result of the violence and the control that Sean Holmes had over her. Sarah, Cassie, didn't come forward until 2023 with her civil suit years after this relationship ended. In your experience, why do victims wait to come forward? Well, every victim story is different, and some victims respond to trauma differently. And with this situation, maybe just out of fear, like I said, he had full control over her, full control of her financially, and just based on her reputation, society, the emotional aspects, the psychological aspects that she's had to deal with. So these things take time,
and she's doing it now, and she should be proud of herself, and we'll see how this pans out. Sarah, Matters, Bernarda, Villona, thank you both for being with us.
Present,
Still ahead,
and no
more
longer has a
jury
voice who will pursue
persecution
justice for her
versus the
accusation.
defense. The strategy
As
from
of the taken
both
against
sides
Diddy,
when it
no
comes to
expansion of the
Cassie's testimony
investigation,
and the portrait
no
they're
isolation
trying to
orders,
paint of
no
Sean
equipment
Diddy
access,
Combs. We'll
no
be right
suspension
back.
of attorney
Music.
communication.
Welcome back to
Everything
ABC News
inside
Live
solitary
Day 2
Block C
of
continued as
testimony in the
before.
Sean Diddy Combs
Everything
trial.
except the
His
fear.
ex-girlfriend,
If a female
Cassie
warden
Ventura,
can vanish
taking
after
the
a single
stand,
note, thing
revealing
except the
never
fear.
before heard
If a
details
female warden
about
can
days-long
vanish after a
drug-fueled
single note,
sexual
ones who
encounters
once
with
worked overnight in
prostitutes.
that area,
Cassie saying
the ones who
if she
filed for
refused
leave
to
without giving a
participate,
reason, the
Canvas
ones who
became
saw but
violent,
never spoke.
and that the
No one
freak-offs
mentions the note,
became a job
but
where
everyone
there
knows
was
it
no space
appeared.
to do
And if
anything
what it
else
says is
but to
true,
recover and
the
just
punishment.
to feel
Part
normal
3.
again.
The
Our
person no
ABC
longer
News
in the
legal
system. The
contributors,
internal personnel
Brian
database
Buckmeyer
of the
and
Atlanta
Bernardo
Federal
Villona,
Detention
are
Center
back with
updated
us.
its weekly
We're going to
roster.
have y'all take
Under the
sides
category
today.
Special Personnel
Brian, you're
Code
the defense.
Adjustment,
Bernardo,
the name of
you're
Warden
the
TD was
prosecution.
marked
Brian,
as removed
let's
from
start with
system
you.
by
If you were
administrative
the
order.
defense attorney
There was
sitting
no
there
decision number
hearing all of
recorded,
these
but was
details, what are you
deactivated.
thinking
Her
if I'm the
personal
defense?
contact
I'm
information
actually not
disappeared
that
from the
worried,
internal
because
network
in a case
exactly
like this,
36
they've
hours
already
after she
conceded
filed her
that there
complaint.
is
The
allegations
changelog
of
was
domestic
executed
abuse
from the
and
system's
violence,
highest
and I'm
access
waiting
level
to see
server,
the
a
government
device
make
bearing
the
the
connection
identifier
between this is simply a man
DCCA1,
and a
located
woman,
in the
and as a
coordination
man,
office on the
because we're
4th floor
hearing
of
that
the Security
violence,
Administration
from
Wing.
Sean Combs
Only
onto
2
Cassie,
individuals possess
just
the authority
brutally
to
abusing
perform
her,
a system-level
hitting her, all the
personnel
things
removal at that
we said
tier,
were
the head of
indefensible,
Federal
but we're
Human
not seeing the
Resources
connection
and
of,
Detention
was
Center.
this force used
No
to compel
confirmation
her to go
exists
across
as
state
station was
lines
made.
for
The removal
trafficking,
of
or
Warden
was this
TD's
simply
name
a-
was not
a man
accompanied
who
by
was a
any
voyager
or
who
protective
liked to
reassignment.
participate in these sexual
At
escapades
11:20
that we
a.m.,
may
a
not
printed
agree
copy
with,
of the personnel
but,
deployment chart was generated in
the
preparation
course
for
of
the
that,
new week's
he used
schedule.
violence.
Under
So
the section
I'm
marked
looking to try
Internal
to slice
Alert,
this
TD's
with a
name
scalpel rather than come in with a hammer and just kind of pick the case apart little by little. Bernarda, how do you think the prosecution did today? What are they trying to do here? So the prosecution is definitely laying out a picture, a story of the life of Cassie with Sean Combs, and especially the violent nature of it, but then the sexual nature of it. And I think what they're doing is piece by piece, they're laying out all these freak off moments, and now they're starting to get to the nitty gritty part, meaning the most extreme ones, the ones that shock the conscious. For example, when she mentioned that Sean Combs would have her participate in these freak offs when she was on her menstrual cycle, I think that right there shocks the conscience, and the prosecution did a great job in ending with that line of questioning to show the jury that, look, this is not just domestic violence, this is not just people having consensual sex, this is the type that no one will want to engage in. And Brian, the defense, has admitted that Combs had non-traditional sexual preferences. Cassie at one point was on the stand flipping through a binder of escorts that they used. We can't even say out loud some of the things that occurred on this show. Do you think the defense can really convince this jury that Cassie and these other alleged victims wanted this? No, I don't think so. I don't think that you can take any of these allegations and say, of course Cassie wanted to do, and again, go and read it, because some of the things we're not allowed to repeat, but the brutality, the coercion, the arguments, the slapping, the dehumanization of what allegedly happened to her, I don't think anyone's going to turn around and say, well, that's just abnormal sexual encounters. But I think the defense can size up and say, yes, that's a crime. You know what we call that? Rape, abuse, sexual assault. Look at the indictment and see if any of those are listed in the indictment. They're not. And I think the defense is going to try to sidestep them and say, where's the trafficking? Where were these allegations used to traffic her? Where's the criminal enterprise? And not just an inner circle or an organization of Sean Combs to help facilitate him getting from point A to point B and doing the things that he likes, even though they're state crimes and not federal crimes. I think they're going to try to sidestep it and argue somewhere else. Bernardo, I have to ask you about these details. The prosecutor is literally asking her about every little thing, down to what these rooms looked and smelled like after these freak-offs. the number of baby oil bottles used each time. Why do you think these details matter here? So, Eva, the devs and details, when you're determining credibility, when you're determining believability, you want the witness to try to give you as much details as possible to determine whether that person is telling the truth. So that's why the prosecution is heavily focusing on these details, because in the end, this case rises and falls on the testimony of Cassie Ventura, and in order for the jury to find a credible and believable, they have to look at a testimony as well as a demeanor, as well as anything that corroborates her testimony, and evaluate all of that to determine, in fact, whether Shakambas is guilty of these crimes. So the devil's in the details, so they have to get it out. Brian, as a defense attorney, how do you handle a cross with a witness like Cassie without taking off the jury? Personally, I don't do it. I think I would first hire someone like Bernardo Villalone. I think that defense is doing something very similar to that. One of the women attorneys are going to cross-examine Cassie Ventura for a number of reasons. One, this is a woman making allegations of sexual assault on that of a man. And two, she is pregnant. The optics of that would look horrible if
Present,
someone like
and no
me does
longer
this,
has a
but
voice
I
who will
think the
pursue
other
justice
aspect
for
of
her
it,
accusation.
From a technical standpoint,
As of the
very
taken
careful,
against
don't
Diddy,
raise
no
your
expansion
voice,
of the
don't get into
investigation,
an argument,
no
be
isolation
as
orders,
soft-spoken
no
and careful
equipment
as her,
access,
but be
no
deliberate in
suspension
your
of attorney
words and
communication.
trying to say,
Everything
"You
inside
said this one
solitary
day,
block
and now
C
you're
continued
saying
as
this another
before.
day."
Everything
So which one is
except
it?
the fear.
Don't get into
If a
battle
female
with her,
warden can
because
vanish
you're
after
not
a single
gonna
note,
look
nothing
good
except
doing
the
so.
fear.
Brian
If a female
Buckmeyer,
warden can
Bernardo
vanish
Villalone,
after a single
thank you
note,
both for
ones who
being with
once
us.
worked
Coming
overnight
up,
in that
who
area,
is Cassie
the ones who
Ventura?
filed for
A
leave
closer
without
look
giving a
at her
reason,
time
the
as
ones
an
who
emerging
saw but
star
never
in the
spoke.
spotlight,
No
to
one
the
mentions
star
the
witness
note,
and against
but everyone
Diddy.
knows it
Stay with
appeared.
us. Music,
And if what it
welcome
says
back.
is true,
Cassie
then
Ventura
punishment.
is the
Part
star
3.
witness
The
in this
person no
case
longer in the system.
against
The
Sean
internal
Diddy
personnel
Combs. But
database of the
before all
Atlanta
this,
Federal
she
Detention
once
Center
shined as
updated
an
its weekly
up-and-coming
roster.
singer
Under
who
the
had a
category
recording
Special
contract
Personnel
with
Code
Diddy's
Adjustment,
label Bad Boy
the name of
Records.
Warden
Tonight,
TD
a
was
look
marked
at
as
Cassie,
removed
who
from
she
system
was.
by
For
administrative
that,
order.
we turn to
There was
our
no
Kelly
decision
Carter,
number
who
recorded.
covers
It was
entertainment and pop
deactivated.
culture
Her
for
personal
us.
contact
Kelly, take
information
us back to
disappeared from the internal
2006,
network
when her
exactly
first album
36
was
hours
released,
after she
and
filed her
Cassie was
complaint.
just
The
starting to
changelog
make a
was
name for
executed from the
herself.
system's
Who was
highest
Cassie
access
Ventura?
level server,
Yeah,
a device
you know,
bearing
let's
the
go back
identifier
even a little bit
DCCA1,
further to
located
really
in the
put into
Coordination
context,
Office on the
because
4th
in
floor of the Security
2004,
Administration
we have
Wing.
Sierra dropping her debut
Only
album
2
in
individuals possess the
2005.
authority to
Rihanna
perform a
drops her
system-level
debut album
personnel removal at that
2006.
tier,
Cassie
the head
comes
of
around
Federal
and
Human
drops her
Resources
debut
and
album,
Detention
really,
Center.
the landscape was
No
very
confirmation
ripe for R&B
exists
pop
as patient was made.
princesses to kind
The
of take
removal of
over, and
Warden
she
TD's
really
name
looked
was
as
not
if she was
accompanied
going
by
to
any
fit
or
nicely
protective
along what we were
reassignment.
hearing on the radio
At
and what
11:20
we were
a.m.,
seeing
a
in
printed
music
copy of the
videos.
personnel
She was
deployment
discovered
chart
by
was
Ryan
generated in
Leslie, who
preparation
is a
for the new week's
songwriter who
schedule.
has written and
Under the
hits
section
for
marked
people like
Internal
Beyonce,
Alert,
Britney
TD's
Spears,
name
and of course Sean Combs, and it seemed as if all of the ingredients were there for her to fit quite nicely in this scope of the R&B music scene from young women. So it sounds like she was such a promising young star. What happened here? What happened is we kept waiting for more music to come. When that first album came out, it lived on the top 20 for a couple of weeks, and it was like nothing. What you've been hearing a lot in today's testimony is that she signed this 10-album deal with Bad Boy Records, but only one album came out, and for the longest time people kept waiting to hear more, see more, what was going to become of her, because we saw her on red carpets, right? And then we had to wait about 6 years after that debut album from her dropped to get her on a Nicki Minaj track, and I thought maybe that was going to, bring some new music from her. We kept hearing Sean talk about how she was constantly in the studios working with producers, but we really weren't hearing any new music and certainly no new albums. Cassie, as we have been able to see, is very pregnant right now, about to have her third baby. What more do we know about her life now? It seems very quiet, far more quieter than it was when, of course, she was with Sean, because we were seeing, as we keep rolling, a lot of red carpet footage, a lot of event footage. It's a quieter life, and it seems very sweet. She is someone who often makes a lot of proclamations on social media and Instagram about how he wishes the days were longer so that he could have more to spend with his sweet wife, who is the bestest, in his words, the bestest mama that could ever be, and they're about to have their baby. So it's quiet and obviously much more regulated. Kelly Carter, thank you as always for being with us. Thank you, and thank you so much for streaming with us. We'll be back with new episodes every day of the trial right here on ABC News Live, Disney Plus, and Hulu weekdays.
And for even more on the Diddy Trail, make sure to follow our podcast, Bad Rap, the case against Diddy, hosted by our very own Brian Buckmeyer on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. I'm Eva Pilgrim, New York. Have a good rest of your day.